Really happy to have everybody here. We're going to talk today about integrations, specifically about the ServiceNow integration. So I'll bring everybody out on stage pretty soon here, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about the integration strategy at Jamf. Now, if you were at the product strategy and direction session, we talked a little bit about the pillars of what we do with product and the strategy. One of those pillars is integrations. So we're going to talk specifically about the ServiceNow integration, but it's a very good example of what we're really trying to do to extend the platform. So we look at the ecosystem in which the IT world lives and where we can find like solutions. ServiceNow is a good example. If you saw the UCSD Jacobs Medical Center presentation, that is another example where we're integrating with Epic, we're integrating with Crestron, we're trying to improve the patient bedside experience by finding all those things that are a part of that world and that story and solving the problem together with other app providers. We call it the follow the app strategy, where we look at that ecosystem and the apps, the software that's out there in the world. You'll also recall that we are looking at what we can do potentially with Office 365 and some of that kind of integration. We have an app config community that's out there. App config is a way to provision out apps and pre-configure those. That's another part of the strategy. So when we talk about integrations, we're talking about how do we talk a common story, bring multiple solutions together to solve a problem. We're talking about the actual app config itself, where we do some integration, we provision software, but we also do some configuration of that software. And we're talking about really sticky integrations, API-based integrations, just like we have with ServiceNow. So this is a really exciting project. I'm going to introduce now the team that made this possible. So the ServiceNow team is Rebecca Diaz. She goes by Becky. She's the product manager at ServiceNow. We've got Tanya Pfeffer. Tanya Pfeffer's a systems engineer. She is the ServiceNow user and also the Jamf Pro user. So this is our end user here. And I've got Nick Amundsen, our director of research here at Jamf. Please welcome them to the stage.
Oh, Joe. All right, good morning, everyone. Hope you had a good time last night. It felt like I had a big night out on the town. I got an 18-month-old, so that was a big deal to have a good party. If I put up a bottle of whiskey here, I hope I don't make any of you sick. The reason why I reached out to the Jamf team, actually, this entire integration started very grassroots. We had released a product called Client Software Distribution. I'll talk about that a bit more in a second. But then I started having everybody ask me about Macintoshes, and actually ServiceNow, the company I work for, actually is a Mac shop. And we use Macs, and then I started having customers come and ask me, Adidas, I had Zillow, I had, the numbers just kept coming in, and I really wanted to understand why that was. And realistically, in the conversations, what I found out is that Macs are progressively becoming more strategic. And part of that is a byproduct of the consumerization of IT. Basically, you want to come into work, do things at work, and be productive just the way you would if you were at home. So what you do at home and what you use at home, you kind of want to be able to leverage in the workplace. And a lot of people were using Macintoshes now and had transferred over to that in their personal lives. So they wanted to be able to bring their own devices. And the fascinating thing about this is not all the organizations were actually buying the equipment. It's just kind of like me with my cell phone. I own this, but the company actually pays for my bill for me, and that's pretty cool. It's because I travel a lot and the like, but it's like I get to bring whatever device I want, So it's about employee satisfaction, and then I started looking at the growth numbers. So sorry, I didn't mean to go there yet, but it kind of overbuilt for me there. So the growth numbers were pretty phenomenal. Basically, PCs were having negative growth, but Macintoshes were actually growing significantly. And when I actually did finally get a hold of the Jamf team, I had actually stalked a few people on LinkedIn, and then I found out, our chief strategy officer had a relationship with Dean. So he hooked me up, and I got on the phone with Dean, and Dean told me about Fletcher's story from last year. And I was kind of blown away. So the numbers he gave me that Fletcher presented last year were, within a 6-month period, they went from no Macs at IBM to 60,000, and they were measuring, cost savings of $270 per Mac. And then last night, I checked in with Fletcher, and I think he had a talk yesterday where the numbers had actually grown significantly, so to 90,000 Macs, and cost savings were as low as 270 and as high as 500. If you do the math on that, you're talking $48 million. Now, for Fletcher in a company that has a $9 billion revenue stream, that might seem like a drop in the bucket. But if you do $270 times every device you have in your company, that's just an unbelievable savings. So for me, it was a no-brainer. I was like, this is it. I've got to do this. By the way, I've done a lot of, I'm the product manager for Orchestration at ServiceNow, and I'm driving our future integration platform as a service strategy. So, for me, it's all about looking at key strategic integrations. And this story kind of drove me to say, we need to do this integration. So what I wanted to do was, talk to Tanya with you guys and sort of get an opportunity or a feeling for what the solution could bring to you. So Tanya, I reached out to you, like a year ago?
Yep,
Yeah,
a little under a year.
Okay, so we both work for ServiceNow, but she's essentially like a customer for me because she's in ServiceNow IT, and I build products that usually I give to external customers. But usually if we have an opportunity internally like SAP integration or something like that, we'll work with the finance BU or whoever it is that uses that particular product. So I reached out to you, and I asked you, what's a day in the life for you, like working with a ServiceNow instance in IT?
If I had known when I got that email that I'd be standing on stage right now, I probably would have answered it differently. I mean, so my day-to-day business is in Jamf Pro. That's where I live and breathe, and the machines that I manage with our team. And ServiceNow is our instance internally we refer to as SURF. So if I say SURF, excuse me, if I say JSS, excuse me as well, is our system for incident tracking and stuff like that. So a lot of incidents come into the IT support group, and if they need to get escalated to me, they will, or requests for software, things like that. They come into SURF, and then either the incident will get pushed over to me or someone on the team. And then we'll work in Jamf to do what we need to do and make that happen. But I'll export stuff from using the API so that the data is somewhat mirrored. But my nuts and bolts is Jamf. However, ServiceNow is the overall system of record.
So yeah, for those of you that might not know about ServiceNow, we're IT service management. So incident problem change is kind of what people usually engage with us to begin with. So we help automate tasks in the workplace. So, I need a piece of software.
Right.
Okay, you get me some software, and it kind of manages the task management. And then when you bring in these kinds of things, it helps automate the task for you.
Right.
So in your world on the Jamf side, what's a typical day in the life for you when you're dealing with the Jamf product?
Well, there's really no typical day, but an example of software requests. So I happen to share a cube wall with the person who does orders the software. So she'll get a request in Surf saying, I want this piece of software, and will either yell over to me or send me an email or something. Hey, can you push this out with Casper? If there's already a package or a policy in place, it's a no-brainer. If not, I'll build one and we'll make that happen. And then I'll either update her or update the record in Surf, but it sort of happens in a disjointed way in that regard. I'm also, asked about compliance and stuff like that. How many Macs do we have in the environment? Are they checking in? What's our OS overall build and stuff like that? So we create reports and pull from the API, like I said before, and then import that into Surf, or give Excel spreadsheet, even worse.
Yeah, because usually your executive management chain comes into Surf to look at asset data?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. On the above levels and on the executive levels, Surf is the system of record. That's where they're looking. That's where they want the information to be. They don't log into Jamf to see what's going on. They count on me us to get that information to them. So, it's sort of like, even though that ServiceNow is 80% Mac or something like that, we're pretty much a Mac shop, there's still this sort of dissociation with Macs in the enterprise, even at a Mac shop, that it's like, yeah, I get it, that's your Mac management software, you guys are the Mac people, but ServiceNow is the real product. It's the real platform. So I think that what this is going to do for me that I'm pretty excited about is just sort of, I don't know, give credence. On some level, we're going to have a little bit more high profile. It's like, yeah, we're here to play with the big boys.
So when I contacted you a year ago and I said, what are your requirements? What do you want me to give? Do you remember at all kind of some of the things you said to me in terms of what your asks were?
At the time, the big ask for me was live inventory. So, not needing to pull from the API to give a report on what's going on. Just to have that data seamlessly go into Surf so that my higher-ups can look at reports and see what's going on without having to need to track one of us down to find the information. That's huge for me. That's going to be a big day-to-day savings for me. But I mean, also, the customers that I serve in ServiceNow, they are using Surf to request software. And why should they have this separate thing? So bringing that together that's pretty enormous.
So let's say I leave the company. Mm-hmm. How do you harvest licenses from me? Or let's say for example, I use on a quarterly basis, I use like some screen capturing software, but then I never touch it again for
right.
like maybe another. Could be a half year. It could be a quarter. There's kind of like wasted license usage that's kind of out there. How much money do you think we're wasting? Do you have any idea? I know I didn't prep you for that question, so.
a lot. More than we should. Yeah, absolutely. There's not really a lot of software remediation and license harvesting going on. When someone's offboarded, we take their machine and wipe it, and if we can repurpose that license, we will. But I wouldn't say systematically we are doing that right now very well. And yeah, for occasional use of a software product, I'm not going to push out Captivate to you and then pull it back and then push it out again. It's not worth that. So you'll just have that license sitting on your Mac, and there it sits for you to use it once a year.
Okay, cool. All right, so with the ServiceNow system, you can request for software out of the box, and then it'll manage all the task management through the system, through procurement and the like. With this, it helps automate that process, so you actually get that license entitlement automation and license harvesting. So that's kind of why I was asking her that question. But it feels like, in my conversations with Tanya, that this is how she would always summarize this: is it's a best-in-class solution. You didn't talk much about the security aspect of things.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that for a sec?
Yeah, absolutely. So for example, if there's a zero-day flash vulnerability or something is exposed like that, security will ask us to create a report, how many Macs are vulnerable, who's running what, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Then we'll get that information. We'll make the policies in Jamf and have that distributed that way, then make reports that we give to them on that kind of remediation, as opposed to the security officer is sitting there in Surf anyway, logs in and says, oh, I see this. Oh, you've got this policy already running? Oh, great. Our zero-day flash vulnerability has been remediated before he or she had to do anything at all. So things like patching, obviously I'm pretty excited about patch management. I think everybody is. That kind of integration is going to be enormous in terms of report. I mean, compliance reporting is a big deal for everybody, but
yeah,
for me especially.
We do security incident response case management as well.
Yep.
So when we do have vulnerabilities, people use our system for that. So I think an accurate record of the devices that are in flight, in use,
right.
in the field is really crucial.
And we have, we're a global company. We have IT representation across the globe. So we have, assets that are saying it's in stock, or it's been retired, or it's not in use, or it's in maintenance, or something like that. But I'm looking at the JSS. I'm looking at Jamf Pro, and and I'm saying, hey, this machine checked in 5 minutes ago, and Barry Goldwater or whatever is the user. I don't know why I chose that. So from that standpoint, it's like, so is this machine in use or is it not? Because I'm seeing this live data that it is out there, and Barry's looking at all those political websites. And my superiors or whatever up the chain are saying, oh, those Macs are in stock, or they're not being used anymore, right. or vice versa. So that disconnect between what I'm seeing on the ground and what is reported in SURF, and an export only gives you a snapshot of that data. Our IT support team is awesome, by the way. They don't ever forget to change the status. I didn't mean to throw them under the bus there, but it happens. It's a big company.
That's funny. I was talking to Eric last night, and he was mentioning how if there is any kind of security issue, they can really or if there's any issues relative to an employee, they can definitely use Jamf to kind of just in time deal with that and comply with the corporate policy.
Yep. So
it's kind of nice, the attitude versus the traditional SECM view of the world is daunting big brother hanging over you, where this is more about transparency. I kind of really enjoyed his view.
Yeah.
And then Fletcher's attitude was we don't have a policy that inhibits creativity.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty awesome as well. Cool. So let me describe this solution a little bit for you guys so you get a sense for what the actual product does. There's a lot of words on the screen, so my apologies there. So the way that I pitch this is, when I joined ServiceNow, the first day you walk in, you get a backpack, you have your computer, you've got your Mac, you got all your dongles in there, it's got all your software already loaded, you're productive day one. So the idea should be that you can leverage this in that onboarding process, not just onboarding you into all the user ACLs, but getting you the license entitlements that you need. Your management can request for software on your behalf from the service catalog. And the service catalog in ServiceNow normally looks exactly the same. The only fundamental difference is that there's a device that you can select. And I'm going to disclose something right now on stage. The new release will have the ability to put a lease on that. So when you want to request a piece of software, let's say you just need it for a duration of time, you could actually put a lease on it. And then when the lease is about to come up, we'll notify you, and you can request to extend that lease. So if you don't need to actually keep that license, essentially you can give it to somebody else in the company to be productive with. And the idea there is that you won't be as likely to hoard. You know how sometimes you'll get a piece of software and then you just kind of hoard it because it was a really big pain to acquire it in the first place or get approval for it. If there's a sense that that can be reused, that can be leveraged by somebody else, you're not going to be wasting the company money for no reason. The solution does provide SCCM out of the box, and then the Casper integration comes through the App Store, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. I just checked in with the App Store team, so you'll be able to get that within probably a week and a half, 2 weeks max. The solution basically in the back end deals with all the approvals, and you can customize the approval process in ServiceNow for whatever you want it to do. So if the approvals come through the IT team, or if it comes from your management, or if it comes from procurement, or if it comes from a combination of the two. And then the procurement team has the software licenses in the system, and every time somebody makes a request, it actually places that entitlement for that given device or that user, and it provides different licensing mechanism structures. So if it's, it can deal with things that have to do with per CPU, per user, subscription basis. And then you can incorporate this into the on and offboarding process. And it also does have dashboards that will show users who have software that are not entitled. And sometimes that could be for compliance reasons, like Becky has a copy of Dropbox on her computer, and she's synchronizing all the intellectual IP into her private Dropbox account. perhaps, you want to have a revocation policy for that. I don't know, how your company interacts, but you could do backdoor revocation, or you could help them out in situations where they're not very smart because there's something that's got a sniffer or, a peer service in it, and they just didn't know when they downloaded it. And then there's quite a few executive reportings. When Nick gives the demo, he'll show you the less pretty version of the reporting. We do have really excellent, gorgeous reporting with our performance analytics solution that shows summation over time and the like, but we won't probably cover that in the demo. So that's a big picture of what the product is, and and then from there, let's see what it looks like live. Nick's actually going to make this come to life for you.
Becky. All right, so for those of you who were in the keynote, we're going to start kind of where that left off. So I'm going to go ahead and run through that scenario again where we're going to request a piece of software. I'll show you some of the things that are happening behind the scenes, and then I really want to get into how this actually works and actually show you some of the setup, show you some of the tables that are involved, and all those kinds of details that you're probably wondering about at this point. So the demo is kind of like this. We're sitting in self-service. We want some piece of Adobe software because those are not available to just anybody because there's a monthly fee for that, right? I don't have it yet. I'm going to go over to the ServiceNow catalog and request that. I've got a few of the other Adobe titles in here now, like Adobe Illustrator, InDesign, Photoshop. So let's go ahead and try to install Illustrator here. And I'll click Order Now, and we'll kind of look into what's actually going on behind the scenes here. So in the Jamf server, as I was mentioning in the keynote, really all we're using here is policies, right? And we'll show you exactly how all this stuff syncs over in just a minute. But I actually have an Illustrator policy all set up, and there's no scope defined at the moment, but pretty soon we should see, yeah, my MacBook Air actually got added to the scope of that policy. So when I mean that you can use all of the settings that you already can use in policies, I truly mean that. You can go in here, you can define what the user is going to see once it pops into self-service. You can actually set it so that it does deploy automatically. You can tweak the frequency and when it's available to the user. All those settings are exactly how you know them today. Oops. So let's go back to self-service. A lot of services being thrown around here, right? And so there we see Adobe Illustrator just like we'd expect. I'll go ahead and hit install. And in full disclosure, I did actually kind of mock this up for demo purposes, so Adobe Illustrator will install much quicker than it typically does. But it will install into the apps folder just how you'd expect there. So that's how that part works. And then again, going over to what does the IT administrator see, right? So this is the client software distribution dashboard. I only highlighted two things in the keynote. So the requests that are going on in there, you see various requests for like Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, and the approval status of those. We see any kind of reports that you want to show on that dashboard. This is all configurable as well. And we'll get into some other reports that you could create in just a moment as well. But there's also some interesting metrics here that you can find out about the software installation status, right? So what's actually happening on the back end once something installs is the Jamf server is reporting back to ServiceNow that it's successfully installed or maybe it did not successfully install. And you're going to see charts that actually show this in a very high-level view, so you don't have to click on every computer to figure out, does this have this or does this not have it? So that's really helpful as well for an IT administrator. All right. So you're probably wondering, how do we actually set this stuff up? All right. So once you install the app, you basically look for the Jamf macOS integration in the ServiceNow sidebar there. The first thing you'll want to do is configure a Jamf server. It is actually set up to support multiple servers, so if you have like a demo environment as well as or a test environment as well as a production environment, it will support multiple servers right out of the box. But we go ahead and configure a server. Pretty simple to do, just the URL to your Jamf server. The other thing we'll do as well is create some credentials. So you go ahead and in the Jamf server create an API account that has access to computers, has access to be able to scope policy to a computer, and then you go ahead and put that into ServiceNow. So for many integrations, you've probably already done something like this. Once all that's in place, then ServiceNow can actually start syncing with the Jamf server. But we've actually used one more thing that's fairly new, which is called webhooks. So let me first kind of introduce the theme of what is a webhook. Webhooks are a way, basically, to be able to have a server respond to a different server when something happens, right? So before we had webhooks, Becky was actually bringing up this point when we were working together on this integration. How are we going to keep this inventory up to date, right? Typically what would have to happen is we'd have to repoll the Jamf server pretty frequently if we wanted that inventory information up to date, and that's a big load on both the ServiceNow server as well as the Jamf server. I don't think she knew this, but at that time we were actually working on webhooks, which as you guys all know, we released in 9.9.3, and it's actually pretty critical to our patch management solution. So we were really thankful that that was being worked on already anyway. But in the Jamf server, if you haven't seen this yet, under the settings and global management, we have webhooks. And webhooks are a way, again, to be able to subscribe to a specific event. And in this case, we want to subscribe to the computer inventory completed event. And there's a URL, this will all be in the documentation for the app as well, that you enter for the ServiceNow side. Thankfully, ServiceNow also supports incoming webhooks. So we'll take a look at that in a second here. And this is included in the app, so this is not something you have to configure, but you'll see a little entry there for Jamf. This is just showing that ServiceNow is going to be expecting webhooks to be coming in at this extension of the ServiceNow instance URL. So that's how we kind of magically keep everything updated. Funny story, there's actually a report that I'm going to show you in a minute here, but yesterday I was actually updating inventory manually. I was going in and actually setting the warranty on some of the computers in the Jamf server. And I thought, well, I'm going to probably have to go and sync this, but I went over to ServiceNow and everything was already up to date. So, you know, it's truly not only the computers updating inventory on their own, but if you are to go in there and update any inventory attributes yourself, it also syncs over very well. So you don't even have to think about it. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
All right, the other tables, we'll kind of take a look at the other tables that are involved with the integration. So again, after you got the sync going on, you're going to see all your computers populated into a Jamf computers table. This is just an extension for those of you who are already very familiar with the data structure in ServiceNow of the CMDB computers table. So we're just extending that, you know, adding some attributes that the computers that Macs have that aren't available in that table, and putting them into a nice little view here so you can see all of your Macs in one spot. Packages, of course, another very important aspect of the integration. So we just pull over all of the packages that exist in the Jamf server. Policies as well, and this becomes important when you're starting to set up those catalog items, and we'll get into that next. So then there's this thing called a software configuration, and the software configuration is really what defines how this is going to be installed, and more importantly, like Becky was talking about, how is this going to be uninstalled in the case of revocation, right? Whether that's an automated revocation process. So when Becky's explaining, you know, we're going to have the lease capability coming in ServiceNow, as long as you have an uninstall policy defined here, that lease capability will ensure that the software is automatically uninstalled if you want that to happen. So we already support it, Becky. No problem. And then the last but not least is the catalog item in ServiceNow. So this defines what the item is actually going to look like for your end users, whether they be logged into self-service or whether they are logging into the web app for ServiceNow. Many of you probably already know what all this stuff looks like, but this is where you define the price, the recurring price, if it's a monthly cost, the different screenshots, the icon. So this is where you're kind of advertising the software to your end users. Cool. So from there, we can go in and actually start kind of working with some of the data. So we'll run a couple of sample reports. One that I thought would be kind of cool to run would be one that shows, again, like the warranty expiration status of the Macs that I've got. So we'll just start by looking at the Jamf computer table. I'll try to make this a little bigger for everybody to see. So we're going to select the Jamf computer table. We're just going to come up with a pie chart. And instead of the OS distribution report, like I was showing on Tuesday, we're just going to look for the warranty expiration attribute. And I'll go ahead and run this. So this is going to give me a nice little breakdown of the warranty expiration status for my Macs. Most importantly is going to be this little chunk right here where there's some warranties that are expiring in the next couple of months. And we're going to want to either extend those warranties or perhaps those machines are actually due for some refresh. So some new analytics capabilities that we frankly don't show it this way in the Jamf server. Another one that you could run is, if you're trying to figure out, do my machines have enough RAM to be able to run things like the Creative Cloud? I can do a RAM distribution report as well. And so this is going to show me a nice breakdown of, okay, 43 machines have 8 gigs of RAM. 8 probably need to be upgraded because they only have 4 gigs of RAM. But 51 are sitting at that 16 gigs of RAM, so they should have plenty of speed and power to be able to run those apps. So how is all this stuff working behind the scenes? So for some of you really advanced ServiceNow users, basically what we're using is workflows. So we'll go ahead and pop over to the workflow editor, and this is where Becky, I think, spends most of her time, right? And yes, there's still some terminology in here of Casper. We actually did the rename right as we were building the integration, so we're going to have to OD probably several dollars here. But Discover Casper is kind of the overall workflow. So whenever you click the manual discover, or if you have a schedule set up to discover the items in your Jamf server, this is really what's happening. We get the packages, we get a list of policies, we get the computers. And this really doesn't have to be run that often. It's really just for that initial discovery, as well as if you're quickly updating things in the Jamf server and you don't see them reflecting over on the ServiceNow instance, you can manually run this again. But for the most part, everything should keep itself up to date, so you don't even have to think about it. If you are a ServiceNow advanced user, you could get in here and actually clone these items and make your own workflows if you're trying to come up with other use cases of how to interact with the Jamf server. All right, I think that pretty much concludes the demo. So we kind of walked through what the end user sees, what the IT administrator sees, and so we'll go ahead and turn it back over to Becky. She can do a little recap as well.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about this stuff too, just to show you, is you've got access, if you will, to all of these building blocks, all these Legos that are in here. So, if you want to do composition for whatever purpose that you have that isn't supported by default by the app, you can use these Legos to incorporate them into larger workflows. And this is just the subflow that's being called from the parent flow from the client software distribution solution. So it's quite extensible, very powerful. For those of you that aren't familiar with ServiceNow, it is an application platform as a service. Its entire solution is designed to build net new applications. It's got the webhooks is coming in through the API management layer. You're seeing table structures here that have been created for the Jamf data, and we're doing discovery as well as workflow. You have scheduling in there. We actually ended up taking the scheduling out because we were getting the near real-time processing, but it's a very powerful platform for application development if you're not that familiar with ServiceNow. So I'm not sure how to go back to this guy.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, magic. So, what you saw there was, you saw client software distribution in action from the service portal. We do have really nice support for mobile devices, so that service portal experience from the mobile device is nice as well. You can request for software on behalf of your employees. You saw the reporting that he has. That's the reporting that comes out of the box. There are reporting for doing enterprise reports for accumulation over time. The product actually has something called Orchestration ROI, which allows you to measure how much you're spending on human engagement and ultimately how much this helps in the automation process. So if you need to justify the purchase of the product or basically demonstrate to management the value you're bringing to the company, that's a very powerful tool. It will actually analyze how much time is taken on task and let you know exactly how much money you're spending on a given area. And then you can associate this to the workflows and it'll tell you the cost savings you're giving. So you can actually justify the investment in the offering. Yeah, and so we did the discovery for both hardware and software. If you find that we missed some attributes, let us know. Joe and I would love to hear from you if you have any additional asks there. And this entire solution is built on the extension framework. So we can plug a Jamf right in there natively, no problem. If you were using a product like BigFix or something like that, that could also be plugged in as well. So that's it, I think, as far as our presentation is concerned. If there's any questions, I'd love to take them now.
So I know one of the questions that did come up is there a cost associated with this? I wanted to also show you guys, we're not kidding when we say this is in, so if we can pop back over to the demo computer, if we can, so this is what the listing will actually look like in the ServiceNow catalog in the store. So we did decide to actually price this at $250 per month. This is very much in line with other plugins that Jamf has offered in the past, like the SCCM plugin. And the main thing is, we just want to make sure this can sustain itself and that we can continue to develop it to your needs. So there's a small fee associated with that, but it's pretty much in line with other apps that are in the store as well.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of roadmap things that where a maintenance is good for. So if patch comes out, leveraging that in security incident response in the future, I could see that being very valuable. We've been talking about usage metering, and if the scale of data becomes feasible, that might actually get incorporated into software asset management as well. So.
Yep. So, and I'm going to take some other questions here from the Twitter feed. Just as a reminder, if you saw it at the beginning there, the hashtag for this is hashtag JNUC 2016 now. So JNUC 2016 now. Feel free to add some additional ones. So you talked a little bit about the pricing and some of the roadmap things that we're looking at. I'm going to plug Jamf Nation again. As you look at this integration, think about it as a platform for other kinds of integrations that are similar. What are some other integrations that you'd like us to pursue? What are some other integrations that you would like ServiceNow to pursue? Let Becky know. And then just as far as like additional function that you could get out of this kind of integration between our two companies, what would you like us to add? Now, to take a step further though, compatibility. Let's talk about what you need to have in place to use this. What do our users out there who might already have both platforms or are looking at them, what would they need to know about what I need to have in place to get this working?
On the ServiceNow side, we started with Helsinki. Istanbul is just about to be released, so it's automatically forward compatible. But Helsinki is kind of the baseline that we built on.
Yeah, and on the Jamf side, 996 is the version that is compatible with. Two things. So webhooks was definitely a big aspect of this, and there were some enhancements in that from 993 to 996. The other big aspect is there was a little tweak to the policies API that allows us to just add a single computer to the scope of the policy rather than having to define the whole list of computers that need to be in scope. So 996 is the requirement on the Jamf side. All
right. Another question here. So what are the advantages that the ServiceNow and Jamf integration would offer over other kinds of IT service management tools or help desk, service desk integrations?
Single pane of glass for managing Windows and Mac. I'm not aware of any IT other service management tool that does that, so I think we're first to market. So there you go, unless you guys have built an integration I didn't know about.
No, I mean, I think the client software distribution aspects are really huge, and that's where the integration shines over, just simply being able to see your inventory. It's being able to also seamlessly have your users interact with that catalog, and behind the scenes as an IT admin, you don't really have to do anything. And then the functionality that ServiceNow is going to be developing going forward, everything is really moving towards trying to make efficiencies in IT. So the leasing aspects are really exciting to hear about, and just there's other solutions that do similar things, but not to this level, I don't think. And ServiceNow is really well known.
Can I speak to that just for a second in terms of what Becky said, single pane of glass? You hear that a lot when people want to kind of get Macs out of the marketplace. You know, yeah. So my superiors are looking at ServiceNow. You know, they want to see real data. They want to see real-time data. They don't, I mean, this whole idea of choice is huge. The fact that now my CIO can sit there and look at the stats that are live, and you know, if I'm using a Mac or a PC, it's an SCCM plugin, or it's, you know, Landesk or whatever, or, you know, Mac with Jamf, that's the single pane of glass right there. And then you still get the best of class solution in terms of deployment without having to compromise the reporting and the infrastructure that you already have in place. I think that's the huge thing about this integration.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, really, if you look at it, there's a number of stakeholders that benefit. That's different from just a typical service desk type of integration. It obviously helps with end user support. It helps with the service people who are serving those users, but it's also the other stakeholders. It's the CISOs that are doing reporting and compliance. And then it's the automation to get software provisioned out. So think of it as you know, touching more stakeholders in your environment.
And you basically have access to the Jamf data for any kind of application development. So ServiceNow is much more than just IT service management. So there's probably other use cases out there. Right?
And I know we have a lot of questions coming in, so you know, bear with us. We only have about 4 more minutes for questions. Follow up with us afterwards and shoot us notes. We'll be sure to get to the things we can't cover today. What about the actual environment that's required? So, and this is maybe a question to talk about a little bit later, but does ServiceNow require a limited access JSS in the DMZ to communicate?
I can take that. Yeah, so ServiceNow supports this concept of something called a mid server. And so what the mid server will do is it will help facilitate that interaction in case you have an on-prem Jamf server. It'll help facilitate that interaction so that there's connectivity if ServiceNow is in the cloud and your Jamf server is on-prem. Of course, if both are on-prem, which I don't think do you guys offer that in some of your larger customers?
We have like 0.01% of customers doing
got it.
on-prem. So I don't know what the actual percentage is.
The bottom line is it will work no matter where your Jamf server is, and it does support that mid server right out of the box as well.
Yeah, so the mid server is basically a reverse proxy engine that establishes connection with us securely. It's gone through numerous security reviews. We're used in the federal government. It's very, very robust. And it's used to do a lot more orchestration than just even integration with Jamf. We can automate PowerShell, SSH. We do JMS integration, JDBC. Very powerful engine. Yeah.
Quickly, since we're on that topic, do you have any integrations for PeopleSoft?
PeopleSoft. Actually, the orchestration product has a turnkey design pattern for showing how to do integration with any HR system. We demonstrated with Workday out of the box, but it's 100% applicable. And it takes near real-time processing for that. And then you could also integrate with the PeopleSoft APIs. I do know of people that have done it, but we don't have a turnkey solution for PeopleSoft today.
Okay, very good. Now, Nick, question for you. In the demo, you requested the software, and you had a process that added your machine automatically to scope. How is that set up?
Sure, yeah, so we're mostly using the Jamf REST API to be able to do that. Policies is an object that's available in the API, and we can edit the scope of a policy using the API. So, there's just a workflow that's being kicked off in the back end where when I select the machine that I want to install that software on, which again is being pulled in through that inventory discovery process, it then knows what ID of a Mac needs to be scoped to that policy. So that's how we do it. So
do our admins out there need to do anything in Jamf Pro to make that work?
Just set up the Jamf server in ServiceNow and have an API account that has the ability to do that.
Very good. So let's talk a little bit about, this is a kind of another licensing question. So licensing for the app. So I'll just go into this, and since we already have the screen up. The way that the licensing works, so it's an annual subscription for the Jamf macOS integration. So annual subscription, it's billed monthly. and then you can renew when you're ready. So there was a question about perpetual license. If you're a perpetual license customer, subscription license customer, that part doesn't matter. If you're on-prem, if you're in the cloud, if you're subscription or perpetual with Jamf, all you need to do is have the things that we've mentioned in place to use the integration. So version control, we see here Helsinki. It looks like Helsinki is the version that they would need to have as well. Question about device discovery. So the question is device discovery available without orchestration?
The integration solution was built on orchestration, so it does require orchestration today. And that's because we looked at a lot of different design patterns for that to see if the discovery part should be, and we opted in for orchestration. But that would be up to you guys if you chose to take a different approach in the platform. So it requires orchestration today.
Very good. Reporting related question. Can custom extension attributes be pulled into ServiceNow, or are there plans to enable that in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. Definitely somewhere we want to take the integration in the future. Today, there would be somewhat manual process to be able to get that to work. Once you set up your extension attributes, you'd have to then go over to ServiceNow and edit a couple scripts in there where we are inserting the data, basically transforming the data from the Jamf API over to ServiceNow. So it would be pretty intuitive, even if you're not a scripter, to just go in there and find the name of the extension attribute and make sure it gets transformed over to a field in ServiceNow. But we hope to be able to make that a more turnkey process in the future. Yep.
And the orchestration product, just so you know, to be able to wrap any REST API, you just point it to it, you test it, it will build reusable Lego without writing any code. So there's codeless automation for REST, SOAP, JDBC in the product.
Very good. So we are actually 1 minute over time, so we don't have any more time for questions. But we do have, of course, our ServiceNow experts here. So feel free to approach them, find them. You can follow up later. I'm sure there's a lot of questions that have come in. The one thing that I want to just kind of say to summarize all of this is that it is going to be available within the next week and a half or 2 weeks. Because it supports multiple servers, if you have a test environment, you can test it very easily. And so that's something that's very nice. We know that out of the box, you're going to get a wonderful experience, but these are different kind of Lego building blocks. So if you want to take it another level and you want to start building out on top of this, you can do that. And that's one of the wonderful things that I think this provides. There's a lot of flexibility in this solution. We're trying to provide the most value just kind of out of the box and then let you take it from there and run with it. So that's all we have for today. I know there's a lot of more technical questions and things. Again, we've got our wonderful team from ServiceNow and from Jamf here to answer those. But thank you very much, and please a round of applause for Becky, for Nick, and for Tanya.